At 1-10, Boston College is a favorite on the road against Syracuse, and they should be because they're going to win against the Orange on Saturday, and I'll explain why.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Locked On Boston College, your team every day. I'm your host, AJ Black of Eagle Insider, part of the 247 Network. I've been covering Boston College for over 10 years. I've been hosting this podcast for 5 years. We are a free daily Boston College podcast available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. So if you are looking for details, analysis, and news on your Eagles, you are in the right spot. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. On today's show, it is our big preview show. We're going to do it before Thanksgiving. We're going to give you predictions. Who do you want to see play for BC on Saturday? We're going to talk about Fran Brown and the Syracuse Orange and how they look and how BC can win this game. And to do it, we're going to do a special Wednesday episode with Mitchell Wolfe of Eagle Insider. Mitch, how's it going?
It's going well. I'm excited to talk about this team that BC is going to play because this is a program that I have a lot of thoughts about, namely their head coach. But I think BC has a very good chance of winning this game. Syracuse is just about as down and out as BC is this year after a hot start. So, obviously a win here wouldn't wipe away how bad this season is, but it would at least rinse some of the bad taste out of the mouth of the fans because, beating a rival at the end of the season is always at least we did something, and this wouldn't go down as unequivocally the worst season in program history.
Right, because what we're looking at right now is if BC loses this game, they go 0-8 in conference. They would not have beaten an FBS team this season. There's a lot on the line for the Eagles in this game on the road where Bill O'Brien has won one game as a head coach for Boston College. There's a lot of pressure here. But talk to me about how BC kind of lines up against Syracuse and why you think that they kind of have a bit of an edge in this game.
So the first part of it is Syracuse's offense in that they are on their third, you could argue fourth or fifth quarterback for this game because Steve Angeli, who was their starter to begin the season, went down against Clemson, out for the rest of the year. They went to Ricky Collins, who was going to be their starter before Angeli came along, and he was very bad in just struggled to throw the ball. He's a good athlete, but really struggled with accuracy and turnovers. They turned to Joseph Filardi, who is a true freshman, came to Syracuse primarily as a lacrosse player, but they put him in a quarterback against UNC. He was very bad, so they went back to Collins for a game. Then they went back to Filardi last week against Notre Dame, and if you were paying attention, you know how that went. Filardi basically threw two pick sixes early in the game. And Notre Dame gets out to this 21-0 lead in less than 5 minutes. And he made some plays in garbage time, and he scored a touchdown with less than a minute to go to get Syracuse on the board. But he looks like a guy who is a true freshman who should be playing another sport. Yeah, he's a walk-on.
Walk-on too.
He looks like he should be playing another sport. And then they have they have a few other freshmen that could play. They have another one, Luke Carney, who they're going to try to redshirt. So he's already played in 4 games, so he's probably not going to play. I forget the other backup's name, but he's another true freshman.
Bylan or something like that. I think.
Yeah, Dan Beelan or Bylan or something.
Rich Bylan or something like that.
Oh, I thought it was Dan, but Rich, It works too. So as dire of a straits as BC is in with this year with injuries, you see how it can, if it's concentrated at one position, especially the most important position, it can really tank a season because Syracuse's offense has suffered greatly due to this quarterback issue. Additionally, they also missed running back Yassine Willis last week against Notre Dame. He didn't play due to injury. He could miss this game due to that injury. We'll see. He's been a decent player despite how bad their offense has been. And then their offensive line just isn't very good. They've been shuffling guys around in recent weeks. A lot of them are huge. They're big guys. They just don't block very well. And this is really my whole thesis with going into Syracuse this year is they lost so much talent on offense to the NFL and the transfer portal. They lost LeQuint Allen, obviously Colin McCord, running back LeQuint Allen. They lost tight end, wide receiver Rondé Gadsden, wide receiver Trevor Pena. All these guys, and all those guys went to the NFL. Pena went to Penn State. Yep. That was basically their entire offensive production from last year. And they brought in some guys. They bring back Darryl Gill. They brought in Jonte Cook, who hadn't played a ton, but was a good athlete. They still have tight end Dan Villari, who's been there forever, it seems. And it was okay for a few weeks with Angeli at the helm, but once you downgrade a quarterback a little bit, they just haven't really been able to do much. So that's the problems on offense. On defense, this team is largely the same in terms of they don't stop the run. They seemingly choose to not defend the run, which is certainly a strategy. And they've got some players in the secondary, Deuce Chestnut, who's, again, been there forever. Their highly touted freshman, Demetrius Samuel, who Fran Brown couldn't stop talking about how he was going to be the next Travis Hunter, how he's going to play him both ways this season, how he's this incredible athlete who's going to do all these amazing things. AJ, do you want to know how many offensive snaps Demetrius Samuel's played?
10.
That's how many he played in the game against Colgate.
Okay.
That he has played 17 offensive snaps this year in 3 games versus Colgate, Miami, and Notre Dame, all of which have come in garbage time. And his one target came against Colgate was 1 reception for 10 yards. That's what the 10 came from. Travis Hunter is a unicorn for a reason. You don't just find these guys. And again, it was just silly to talk about that this was going to be the stock point. And to his credit, Demetrius Samuel struggled early in the year at cornerback, considering he was a safety in high school. Gotten better. He's not committing as many penalties. He's a good cornerback, but just don't make him what he isn't, especially when he's like, they made this whole big thing. Every Syracuse game, he's the second youngest player in college football. He's 17 years old, all this stuff. So he's settled in fine. Their other cornerback, Chris Peel, who's a transfer from Georgia, is pretty good. But this team doesn't really have a pass rush. Their linebackers are pretty consistent. Antoine Delorier, who's a true freshman, one of their linebackers, he has made some impactful plays, and he's going to be a star in coming years, but he's a freshman, so he's had some issues with missed tackles. He's not perfect, but he's a good player. But this team is just so discombobulated. They don't have the talent up front to really do anything. Because, again, they lost talent to the NFL. They lost Fadel Diggs to the NFL. They lost Justin Barrett. They lost Marlo Wax. They lost Elijah Carter on the back end, who's safety. And they lost their star nose tackle, Murad Watson, to Texas in the portal. So when you lose all these players to the NFL and to the transfer portal to better schools, your team is going to get worse. And this defense was already very bad last year, and they got a lot worse. They for BC fans, that one of their big portal acquisitions this offseason was George Rooks, BC's defensive tackle. Now, George Rooks was an okay player at BC, but losing him was not this. I mean, obviously it looks bad now, but it was not this catastrophic departure because George Rooks barely added anything in the run defense part, aspect of the game, and he wasn't much better as a pass rusher last year. So there wasn't really anything he could add, and he has basically done nothing for Syracuse this year. I think according to the Syracuse stat sheet, he has like 15 tackles. According to PFF, he has 7, and he has 0. Count them, 0 pressures, despite playing 279 snaps, which I think is top 10 for their defense. So he's playing a lot. He's just not making any impact, which is kind of the story. That was kind of the book on him at BC. Like, he's a solid player, but he's not going to be this incredible talent. He has the 14th most snaps. I'm sorry. But yeah, they just don't have a lot of impactful players. And last year they had this magical season because they were playing an extremely easy schedule, no power teams out of conference. And this year that changes to on the road at Notre Dame, neutral site versus Tennessee, a home game versus a good UConn team and an FCS team. And of course, all their ACC games are against some of the best teams in the ACC. They had this run where they went, I think it was Duke, SMU, Pitt, Georgia Tech, UNC, so a blip there, but then Miami and Notre Dame. So Notre Dame's not in the ACC, but you're playing all these better teams. Your team got a lot worse. You're going to be a worse team. And I think if Angeli didn't get hurt, they probably would have been 6-6, 7-5, 5-7, somewhere around there. But when you lose that quarterback who was a good player, it seems the bottom falls out of your team, and they're generally they had their hot start, but since then they've been just as bad, if not worse, than BC.
Can you just, for 30 seconds, talk about Joe Velarde a little bit more?
I mean, I've watched him, and respectfully, he looks terrified. Watching him play the Notre Dame, and granted, Notre Dame's a very good defense, and to Velarde's credit, when his other start against UNC has a pretty good defense, and it's Bill Belichick. He knows how to take advantage of an inexperienced quarterback. But he just looks absolutely terrified out there. He is running around, and you can just feel the fear watching him. And I texted you that when I was watching them against Notre Dame, I said, this is a snuff film. Like this should not, they should have honestly called the game probably at halftime, maybe at the third quarter, done a running clock, something, because that looked like a top 10 team that Notre Dame is playing a high school team. They were just so much faster, so much more violent than Syracuse, and it showed up on the scoreboard.
It's crazy because, I think a lot of people who don't watch Syracuse are like looking at their record going, well, they're better than BC because they have a better record. Would you disagree with that at this point?
As the teams are constructed now, no, I don't see them being significantly. I don't see them being to a point where it's like, yes, they are definitively better than BC. Because if you look at their games over these last few weeks, they have not been competitive in any of them for pretty much any matter of time. Maybe they didn't allow. I guess they kept Miami off the board for a little bit, but Miami eventually kind of found their footing and put the foot on their necks. It ended up being 38-10. But Syracuse this year has scored, oh my God, it's 19 first half offensive points. They have one since Steve Angeli's injury. Sorry, to make that clear. Since he's been hurt, their offense has just not been able to do anything. Their one touchdown, I think in the first half was a defensive touchdown against UNC. So they just haven't been able to do anything, and their defense hasn't been able to stop anybody. None of their games have been competitive since that Clemson game. They lost by 35 to Duke, 13 to SMU, and I think that was a garbage time touchdown to make it closer than it was. 17 to Pitt, 25 to Georgia Tech, 17 to North Carolina. That game could have been a lot worse if UNC had an offense. 28 to Miami, and then of course 63 to Notre Dame. So just none of these games have been competitive once they've gotten to the half. So this team is just not. And whereas if you look at BC, and again, BC's not very good. They're not a good team, but they were competitive with Georgia Tech to the end. They were competitive with Notre Dame for 3 quarters. They certainly got their doors blown off by SMU, but they had that game interesting in the first half. Even going back a few weeks, like again, the Louisville game was interesting. UConn definitely, was in control of that game for most of it, but BC was competitive with them. And to Syracuse credit, they were competitive with UConn too. They went to overtime with them at home. So, I see these teams as being pretty similar in talent. And I think BC is, I feel like SMU is kind of stumbling, just kind of like, please let the season be over. Whereas BC, as we've seen, has fight in them. And I think they're really going to want to end this season on a high note.
All right. In a moment, we're going to talk a little bit about what BC is going to look like on Saturday. Who should we expect to play? And, what should be their game plan to win this? We'll be back in just a moment. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets from everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team is making that late push. When you're watching the Celtics game, if you want to make a parlay. The easiest thing on FanDuel I have found is making parlays. You could do points for Jaylen Brown. If you can score more than 25 points, you can get those odds. Then you stack that with Celtics covering, and maybe then you go with the center and how many rebounds he has. It's so easy to do. Boom, boom, boom. And then you can stack on profit boost, all sorts of great stuff on FanDuel. So right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play with your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Locked On Boston College, AJ Black of Eagle Insider. Thank you all who have made Locked On Boston College your first listen every day. And to our everydayers, all of you who make us part of your daily routine, thank you so much. I hope you all have a great Thanksgiving. We're doing our early prediction episode with Mitchell Wolfe. And Mitch, let's talk about what BC has to do in this game. There's been some players that have sat that I think still have some eligibility left that they can still get their red shirt. Was it Amari Jackson? I think can still play. Mm-hmm. We can see Chuck Nadeau. I mean, fine.
I think in theory, Sire Torrance could come back.
Oh, really?
He only played in 2 games. I mean, and because he played so much last year on special teams, he didn't redshirt last year. So this could be kind of so they could still play because he only played this year against Fordham and Michigan State. So I'm not sure exactly the extent of his injury, but he in theory could come back. You could see Ashton Cunningham come back. He's already burned his red shirt, but they need help in the secondary because Max Tucker has been playing with a broken elbow. Isaiah Ferris got hurt at the end of the Georgia Tech game So you saw Ashton McShane come in and play a little more at the end. Some of the other young guys have already burned through it. So like, I'd like to see more Griffin Collins, just because I thought he has made some plays over the last few weeks. Trying to go through. So
Israel Tapapu.
He's played a lot on special teams. So I think he's burned his red shirt, so they might as well keep playing him. I thought he has made some impactful plays here and there. We saw Mekhi Dodd running back against Georgia Tech. I think that was his first action of the season, if not second to the Fordham game. So you could see him if they want to give the other running backs a break. But I think based on what BC did to Syracuse last year, where they just ran over them for, I think, 320 plus yards, and it seemed intentional the way they called that game last year, even regardless of who the quarterback was. They wanted to physically bully Syracuse. And I think that there's some bad blood between these coaching staffs. I think they recruit their peer schools recruiting the same players. So I'm sure that they're negatively recruiting each other, despite what they would say.
Well, BC flipped 2 of their recruits last year. So Bo McCormick is one of them.
Yeah. So I think there's some bad blood between these programs. And I think, and there were some tweets from some people who worked for the program last year that got quickly deleted after the game. But they wanted to physically bully Syracuse. And I think they're going to want to do that again this year. And we've seen the run game be successful against these kinds of run defenses. Ones that are bad. This team ran the ball well against Cal. Cal is a very bad run defense. They ran the ball well against Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech has very bad run defense. We saw them run the ball pretty decently against UConn, who has a relatively mediocre run defense. We've seen it come in spurts with Louisville. Had a moment here or there against SMU. It's been fits and starts, and now that they've had a bye week to rest, you hope the offensive line could be a little healthier. So BC is going to want to run the ball, and that's Turbo Richard, Jordan McDonald, who had a breakout game last year against Syracuse where he was just rumbling all over them. So I think they're going to do a lot of the same with that kind of thing. And again, like I said, Syracuse's run defense is awful. You look at basically every stat they are near the bottom.
Jeremiah Love average 20 yards?
I think 8 carries for 171 yards. He averaged like 13 per carry, I think, or something insane like that. I'm just trying to find Syracuse's run defense stats where I have them, because they are, come on now.
20. Sorry, I'm wrong.
Here we go. They are second worst in the Power 4 in yards allowed per rush. Third worst in the Power 4 in yards after contact per rush. Second worst in the Power 4 in defensive rushing success rate. Second worst in the Power 4 in explosive rush allowed. And I want to say that just because this is funny. So Syracuse is also 133rd out of 136 teams in explosive rush rate allowed. The only team that is worse than them in the Power 4 is Rutgers at 17.8%. So the gap between Rutgers, 136, and Syracuse at 133 is bigger than the gap between Syracuse and BYU, Syracuse 133 and BYU, who is 65th.
Wow.
So Rutgers is just, weirdly enough, like one of the worst defenses in college football this year, which is just kind of a funny thing given, Greg Schiano's history and style. But yeah, this team has not been able to stop the run. They're coming off their worst performance against the run with the Notre Dame game. And I think some of their numbers might be inflated just because of how badly Notre Dame beat them up against the run. But we've seen this all year. Every team has been able to run the ball against them, especially lately as they're dealing with, guys being tired and getting hurt. So I think you're going to see BC do a lot of that on offense. On defense, I'm interested to see what happens here, because when you have a guy like Joseph Velarde at quarterback who is inexperienced, he's young, he can run around a little bit, like he's a good athlete, obviously he plays across, so he can move a little bit, and they can do some stuff with him on option plays, quarterback draws, but he's just not very talented and not experienced enough to really do much. Now, granted, BC's defense has been terrible, especially against the pass. So depending on who you get back in the lineup, like if you get Amari Jackson back in this game, that's huge, because then you can play more man. You can rely on him to go up against Darryl Gill and limit him. Again, Amari Jackson was very good against SMU. So if you get him back, that's great. If not, I think the two avenues would be you can play man, you blitz, and basically you hope that your defensive backs can cover Syracuse receivers for 1 to 2 seconds, and BC's blitzing, so you have the blitz get home in time to sack Velarde, because if you flash pressure in his face, he usually panics. and that he'll run kind of in a circle or run backwards, and sometimes he'll get the ball out, throw it away, or he'll take a sack. So that's one way you could do it. The other option would be, just kind of drop back, play zone, only rush 4, and kind of bait him into making a mistake where he is going to be looking at the defense like, oh my God, there's so many defenders, I don't know where to throw. And then maybe that way you get the pass rush to get home, or he throws interceptions because he doesn't read the defense properly. He is the highest inaccuracy rate among power 4 quarterbacks this year, with at least 40 dropbacks at 20. It's basically 25%. So he's just not a very accurate quarterback. You hope that you can maybe get a tip or an overthrow that can lead to an interception. And then you can create turnovers that way. The downside of the man blitz strategy would be that Syracuse would be more likely to create explosives, which again, BC has been terrible at limiting those. So you don't want to give them explosives because that'll kind of give them some momentum and, some lucky plays, if you will. The other side of the coin is if you play zone, maybe Filardi gets in a rhythm and he starts kind of picking you apart because again, BC's defense has been terrible against the pass this year. So there's, ups and downs to each of these approaches. So I'm not sure what BC is going to do there. Again, Tim Lewis might just go back to his bread and butter and start sending the house, which at this point in the season, sure, whatever. But I'll be interested to see how they do this, especially depending on who ends up playing on defense.
And you were mentioning poor rushing defensive games. So they allowed 210 yards to North Carolina. They allowed 239 yards on the ground to Georgia Tech. They allowed 235 yards on the ground to Duke and 246 yards on the ground to Tennessee. So those were kind of those big games. I don't think they've had a game. Oh, they slowed down. They held SMU to 76 yards on the ground.
And I would imagine some of that had to do with sack yardage, because again, rushing yards in college, sacks are counted against rushing yards. So you have to keep that in mind. But yeah, and SMU, again, when BC played them, we kind of figured they had 1 or 2 big runs, but that's not really their game. They want to throw the ball and be explosive and create all these spread plays. So that doesn't shock me that much.
All right, in a moment, Mitch and I are going to give our predictions for the game. Are we finally picking a BC win? We'll get into that in just a moment. College football is back, and I couldn't be more excited. The tailgates, the rivalries, the energy in the stands, there's just nothing like it. But let's be real. Actually getting tickets can feel more like a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping out at checkpoint. That's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. I use Game Time to get tickets for my family for the UConn game. Yeah, I know. And we're able to get my family 9 tickets the week before the game at an unbelievable price with fees included, and it was delivered directly to my phone immediately. It was so easy to use. I would recommend it to anyone looking for tickets. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Locked on Boston College, AJ Black here, wrapping things up. I want to wish all of you a happy Thanksgiving. I know many of you are probably traveling, so safe travels to all of you and enjoy your time with your family and friends. Now let's wrap things up here, Mitch. One last game. The 2025 disaster is almost over. I think we're both excited that it is almost over because I'm done talking about this season. I'm sure you are too.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking forward to portal talk, coaching changes, and all sorts of other
just anything else.
Whatever gets in. And I mean, I spent 3 days just bashing Earl Grant, so I need something else to talk about. All right, predictions. I'll let you go first. You gonna pick BC to win?
I am, and I do this very solemnly, just because I'm like, this could end badly, because I don't think both of us have picked BC to win a game since
Cal, maybe.
Probably Cal. I was probably Stanford, honestly. But it was Stanford or Cal, definitely one of the two. But
they're 6-point favorites against Cal, so I'm assuming we probably both picked that.
Yeah. So just looking at what Syracuse has done this year, especially since the Steve Angeli injury, they have just been abysmal. They've just been just as bad as BC, if not worse, in basically every category. If you look at my matchup report, which is for VIPs on Eagle Insider, I have all these tables where it shows
75% off right now. Sign up.
There you go. So I have all these tables where it shows basically like all of BC's stats and their rankings, and then the same stats on the other side of the ball for whatever Syracuse is. And all of them are like in the 120s, 130s, like bottom 5 in the Power 4. It's just like, these are both bad teams. That said, again, I think the bye week really helps BC here. They've had a week to rest, to recuperate, to spend the entire basically 2 weeks game planning for Syracuse and specifically Joseph Velarde. So I'm hoping that they're going to cook some stuff up on defense. I, again, think that they're going to run the ball as much and as hard as they can down Syracuse's throat to basically just physically punish them. Dylan Lonergan's going to start again. He's coming off a pretty good game against Georgia Tech. It's going to be a road game. So again, BC has had a ton of struggles on the road in the last 2 years. That is concerning, but I do think BC wins this one. I'm going to be relatively conservative and say 31-24, just because I'm sure that the defense will do something stupid. Maybe the offense will do something stupid too and give them a short field or a touchdown or something. But I think BC's offense has been playing better in recent weeks, and I think they'll be able to put points up on a pretty bad Syracuse defense. And again, it's not going to erase what this season was, but it at least makes it an argument of this being the worst season in program history. And you can say, hey, at least we beat Syracuse. And for me, if Fran Brown ends up taking a job somewhere else and he gets being promoted to a next job, I'll just revel in being like, well, whatever, you couldn't beat BC. You had one of the best seasons in program history last year, and you couldn't beat BC. And then the next year when BC had one of their worst seasons in program history, you still couldn't beat them. So I think BC wins this one, and I really hope they win it because I don't like Fran Brown as a coach, and it's a lot of it just because of how he talks and a lot of stuff he says. I just think it's just bluster, and it's very Dabo Swinney-esque to me. And I've made my thoughts on Dabo very clear on this show and on multiple platforms. I just don't like that style of coaching. So I just hope that they can again rub his face in it like last year.
So I am going to also do this and pick BC. And the reason I'm going with BC was I liked what I saw out of their offense against Georgia Tech, who had a bad defense. Syracuse has a worse defense.
Mm-hmm.
When BC plays a bad defense, for the most part, they're able to score points. Sometimes they've run into bad defenses, and their bad defense isn't able to stop a good offense, and then they just lose. But Syracuse's offense is crap too, so I don't think they're going to be able to score enough to keep pace with BC in this game. So here's what I think is going to happen. I think we're talking about Joe Velarde right now. I give him 2-3 drives, and Fran's going to yank him, and then he's going to put in this Byland kid, and he's probably going to score some points. So I'm going to go with BC winning like 35-30.
Oh boy.
I'm already saying it right now. They're going to win, but that kid, I don't even know who he is, but we've seen it enough. We saw it with Mason Heichel, obviously came out of nowhere, and then he became the second coming of Eli Manning out there, or Peyton Manning out there. And so I don't know who this kid is. He's going to go out there and he's probably going to rip BC.
The funny thing is, I saw something about him like being the New York Player of the Year or something in high school.
Gatorade Player of the Year.
And I'm pretty sure that Velarde was as well for football. Like he had put up some crazy stats as well. Going where he went to high school, I'm pretty sure it was in Long Island or on Long Island, depending on your persuasion. So these guys have put up numbers in New York high school football, but again, Velarde's a lacrosse player, and this Byland guy, freshman walk on for a reason. So, yeah, I mean, I will say this: I'm going to be at my grandmother's 80th birthday party with all of my family, which we were talking about how I really wanted this game to be at noon, so it would be over with by the time this party started, and of course, it got put at 3 for some ungodly reason.
After a bye week, so the season just never ends.
Yes, exactly. So I'll have it on to some capacity, but I'm going to try to enjoy my time with my family, and then I'll watch the game later because I don't want to let this ruin another Saturday of my life.
My 7-year-old thinks BC is going to win this game. He doesn't like Syracuse, so the three of us are all on the same boat here.
Never brain trust.
I know, right? So that's my official pick. My realistic pick, my homer pick is going, this defense will somehow make some plays and make this kid look really bad, and BC wins. What was that game? It was the Dazio year. They scored like 56 points.
Oh yeah, it was like
Dylan and Bailey,
56 or 58-27 or something. Yeah.
I don't think that's going to happen, but I could see them putting up quite a bit of points. But hey, well, starting next week, I am very excited. A, hopefully that they win, and then B, starting Sunday, we'll have a lot of other weird things to talk about. Not weird, but like different things are going to start coming out of everywhere. Now, for folks that don't know, the transfer portal doesn't officially open until January 2nd. Now, an ESPN reporter today said starting Sunday, there's people already with contracts in hands and that they're technically in the portal, but they're already signed. So we're going to get a flood of news starting Sunday. I do expect O'Brien saying he loves his staff and all that. There's going to have to be some moves there too. I can't imagine he's going to go into next year with the same group that he has this year, but we'll have to wait to see. Maybe I don't know anything. Who knows? You can follow me on Mitch. Where can people find you?
You can find me at Mitchell T. Wolfe, WOLFE on Twitter. Check out my work at Eagle Insider. The matchup report is out there. A lot of good, statistical notes, film clips on Syracuse, as dismal as they are. And then we'll have the game preview coming out on Friday. Again, my official pick. As far as I know, BC is still a minus 3.5 point favorite. And on FanDuel, play your way, make everyone more. Play your game, make everyone more.
Entertainment purposes only.
Entertainment purposes only. The odds are still plus 100, which is a very, very good line to get at minus 3.5, even though that's a kind of a wonky number. So I would keep an eye on that and try, if you want to get in on it, get in on those odds before the line shifts up again.
You can follow me on Twitter at AJBlack247. I'm over at Eagle Insider. As I said, 75% off right now. If you want to become a VIP, check that out right now. You can check out all my work. We have updates on transfers, new recruits that could be coming, including a quarterback that we talked about on the show. He took an official visit. We'll hopefully have updates on all of that as the week goes on. On tomorrow's show, well, for Thursday, I'm probably not going to do a show. I'm just not. On Friday, I'm going to do the crossover episode. Our week's a little crazy with Locked On Syracuse, who I could tell you he's not a big fan of what Fran Brown's doing at quarterback either. I've seen him blowing up on Twitter about that, so we'll maybe actually find some common ground on that. And we'll check that out. And I will be going live for our final post-game live show right after the game from a cabin in New Hampshire. So hopefully you join me for that. Thank you all for joining me. Have a happy Thanksgiving, and I'll see you all again soon for another episode of Locked On Boston College, your team every day.